Has debate jargon become too much of a chore? Does every round you enter leave you wanting to know more? Well, look no further because one clap is the key. It's time for Professor Graham and Kevin's ABCs. Hello, debaters. Welcome back to another episode of Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. I'm Professor Graham, here with my pal Kevin, and today the word of the day is going to be rebuttal. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Note: this video is not about final rebuttals. That one will come later, although most of this video is still very pertinent to giving a final rebuttal. Instead, this video is about how to properly extend arguments through speeches so your rebuttals are able to be the most effective versions of themselves. Top level. Here's a general rule to follow. Arguments must be extended in every speech for a judge to evaluate them and their decision. If you read an advantage in the first speech and nobody talks about it, including you, for the rest of the round, you do not get to come up in the final rebuttal and harp on about how they dropped your contention and how it's GG. You need to flag that for everybody so you actually have some leverage behind the whole "they didn't answer this" argument. If you don't flag it in every speech, it should be presumed as dropped. Oh, don't worry, Kevin. It is a lot of work. But with efficient ways of extending arguments, it becomes less painful. And as you start to recognize other people's inability to do this skill, you'll start to realize how important it is to just properly extend your arguments. But now that we know why we're doing it, we should probably talk about how to do it. Earlier rebuttals serve as a way for you to extend through the arguments that you think are necessary to win the debate. The best way to extend advantages and other contentions is by briefly mentioning the impacts they drop and why they're significant. They conceded all the internal links for how you solve those things, so it's not necessary to re-explain all of them, but it is imperative you explain the consequences of them dropping those arguments, i.e. your impacts. For example, go to your contention, explain that conceding your climate scenario means that there's a 100% risk of it happening, and that they must assume the full extent of the impact because there was no response to it, and then you can move on. Don't dwell too long on these extensions, because the point of this is to do things efficiently. If they don't drop it, but you still need to extend your argument, do a similar thing by explaining your impact and then answering their responses. Beyond extending entire pages, there's also specific ways that we should be extending particular arguments. If you really like your no-link argument and think it deserves to make it into the final rebuttal, you should extend it. The way we do this is by following a simple acronym, EAR, or EAR for short. Extend, answer, read more evidence. The first step is easy. Say your argument again so people know that you're extending it. You don't need to repeat every single warrant, but you should get the gist across and cite warrants that you want to carry through the rest of the debate. As well, you should be trying to explain the consequences of why it's important if this argument is true and why it matters. The second part, answering, should be fairly easy. Just answer your opponent's responses to your arguments. Lastly, reading more evidence shouldn't be a problem either, because ideally you have evidence on a lot of these questions that you want to go much deeper on. Obviously, you don't need evidence in every extension, but it should be there for most of them. Let's take a look at a specific contention and try out our EAR method. The opponents have an affirmative that bans cryptocurrency because crypto mining is bad for the environment. We read an argument that says that regulations on these companies don't work because they'll circumvent the ban by lobbying in Congress for exemptions. The affirmative says that fiat solves because the negative can't argue that the plan doesn't go through. Now is our chance to practice. First, extend. We should say that the plan gets circumvented. Companies lobby Congress for exemptions, and that means the plan is never properly enforced and the ban is unsuccessful. That's our X evidence. Now, we should answer their argument by saying, fiat doesn't protect them from this kind of circumvention. We're not saying that they overturn the ban, just that companies find legal loopholes in other laws and areas to skirt past regulations. Finally, we should read more evidence on the question. Evidence that backs up the initial claim with more studies or entirely new reasons why companies are able to circumvent the ban. That was a breakdown of one example for a single argument. It's very likely that you'll be doing this process dozens of times across the flow in just one speech, one after another, refining your craft, being efficient, and learning what arguments to prioritize is key to having debates where you're technically very sound, which will put you ahead of a lot of the debating pack, I promise. Extending arguments actually shouldn't be that tough. With a little bit of practice, I promise it'll come easily. Anything to add, Kevin? Simpler? I hardly know her. Hey, thanks again for watching today's episode of Professor Graham's ABCs of Debate. As always, I'm Professor Graham, and that's my pal Kevin. Yeah, if you ever need any help with debate stuff at all, my email should be right up here. Just make sure you CC your coach. I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can with any debate tips that you might need. I'll drop that knowledge on you. Bam. Thanks for watching. It's been a pleasure. See y'all later.